Hello there, my name is Martin Henley. This is the Effective Marketing YouTube channel. And if you've spent a second here, you will know that I'm on a mission to give you everything you need to be successful in your business. Now, as far as I know, what you need if you want to be successful in your business is really effective marketing. So not only am I here giving you everything I know about sales and marketing, I'm also pulling in anyone I can find to extract their knowledge, to share their experience of sales and marketing with you with a view to enabling you to be more successful in your business. Now, you can support me in this endeavor simply by watching this video through, simply by taking something of value from it, simply by implementing that in your business and commenting about that below. And of course, if you want to like and share, then that would help the channel enormously also. So, today's guest holds a master's degree in business administration. She has video experience going all the way back to 2012 when she served as an apprentice with Creative Scotland. She is currently producer at High Tide, the video production company she co-founded in 2017. High Tide is a video production company that enables big thinkers to connect meaningfully with their audiences and wins awards, and has won clients including Just Eat, Tesco Bank, Edinburgh International Film Festival, Crabbies, ginger beer, Glenmorangie, and other alcohol brands. Today's guest is left-handed and has no appendix. Today's guest is Alex Porter Smith. Hello, Alex Porter Smith.
How are you doing?
I am really well, thank you. How are you doing?
Yeah, good, thank you. You're good at intros.
Thank you.
I
I'm getting better at them. What's that?
I think I'll get that on my LinkedIn, just that video, nothing else.
You can do that. You're perfectly welcome to do that. Yeah, I am getting good because there's been about 60 now. So I'm kind of know where I'm going with them when I start. So that's cool. I want to talk to you about the fact that you're in Edinburgh. Are you in Edinburgh?
Yes, I am in Edinburgh.
The thing about Edinburgh that people may not know is that Edinburgh is the most three-dimensional city, certainly that I've ever been to. And it must be the most three-dimensional city in the world because, like, you have Google Maps, and Google Maps will be telling you you're there at the place you're supposed to go to, but you're clearly not. And then it turns out it's underneath you. It's insane.
I did Tough Mudder with a few of my cousins a few years ago, and they were like, "Oh, Alex, it's going to be hard. There's a lot of hills." And my auntie was like, "Alex will get up the hills. She lives in Edinburgh. Like, there's not a question about it. Like, there's not really, there's not proper hills here like there is in Edinburgh." So, and she was right. I did the hills pretty well. So, yeah, I would agree with that. It's a bit mad.
And there's actually staircases. So you take a staircase from like one street to another street. It's like a computer game.
Yeah, it is. Like, there's in the city chambers, which it's the registry office and a few other things in there. It looks like you come in on the ground floor and you maybe go up one floor, but I think there's actually something like 12 floors below you, because there's another street below that, and so yeah, it's very confusing. There's also used to be a club that did exactly the same, where you went in on the ground floor and you went up about 6 flights of stairs and then you came out on the ground floor. So
it's insane because I was there for the Fringe, so I was there to see some comedy. I had friends involved in the comedy, and so you get to go into some of those venues, and it is like that. You can go in from one street and go up in the building and come out on another street.
Yeah.
It's wild. People don't know this about Edinburgh. I certainly didn't know this about Edinburgh. It is wild, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And it's quite funny when you go somewhere else because you don't really think about that. Like, it's quite normal to me that you can do that. But then you go somewhere else and just go up and then down.
Alex, it's not normal. I promise you, it's not normal. And there can't be. It must be the most three-dimensional city in the world, I think.
Yeah, it's also, I think, one of the most beautiful cities in the world. I'm from Edinburgh. I was born here. I've tried to leave, failed because there's just so much going on, and yeah, it's such a nice place to live. So, I think it's a lovely view,
Yes, and it is a beautiful city, and it has beautiful architecture, and it's quite a creative city, and it's a fun city. Like, you walk into any pub, and there will be something fun going on in that pub. It's not.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think a lot of people do get a shock though when they come for the Fringe And I've heard of people that are like, come to the Fringe and then they're like, I'm going to live here. This is amazing. And then
Yeah.
they come back in October and it's like a completely different place because it's nowhere near as busy for the other 11 months of the year. So,
Yes.
yeah. But I love how it just comes alive in the Fringe, which hopefully it will do this year because it hasn't done the last couple of years. So, yeah.
No. Okay, well, I hope so as well. And what was the other thing I wanted to say? A creative city, like famously creative, Edinburgh.
Yeah, I think, as you mentioned comedy, that is a big one in Edinburgh. But there's lots of other things. Tech is kind of pretty insane in Edinburgh. The games industry is really taking off here. And then theatre. Yeah, there's just lots of like little nooks and crannies of creative, which I think is great.
Yes. So well done you for living in Edinburgh.
Thanks.
Okay,
Thank
good.
you.
So we could talk for this whole hour and 15 minutes about Edinburgh, but let's not. Let's talk about your specialist subjects.
Yeah,
So it was Gareth Healy, whose chat
yeah.
hasn't gone up yet. He recommended you do this, and you just agreed to do it, and we're doing it already. I only spoke to him like 2-3 weeks ago, and I'm sort of filming these about 6 weeks in advance, so that's where we are. So your specialist subject is clearly video production. Is video production a marketing thing? I don't know. We'll get to whether it is or not. I think it is.
Okay. Yeah.
So the 5 questions, how are you qualified to talk to us about video production? Who do you work with? How do you add value in their lives? What is your recommendation for people who want to do better with video production or get better with video production? Number 5, what should people read? No, number 4, what should people read? Number 5, who are you going to throw under the bus who might have one of these conversations with me?
Yeah.
2 people. We'll keep remembering 2 people because then one of them will happen. Okay, good. So question number 1, how are you qualified to talk to us about video production?
Great question. And then I start to think, am I? I mean, I've made a lot of videos with my team, so I would say that's probably the first thing. But as you said in your intro, I started, I suppose, my career by leaving school a year early and doing an apprenticeship at Creative Scotland. And Creative Scotland is like the equivalent of the Arts Council. In Scotland, and there was 2 of us, 2 apprentices there, and they just chucked us in at the deep end and said, right, here's all the projects that we fund, go and pick one, go and film it. And that we just did that for a whole year. Here's a camera, off you go. And so we just made and made and made, and it was just a brilliant experience. So we made a lot of mistakes. There was a lot of content that we made that did not go up there, did not go on their website. But it was just such a baptism of fire and such a fun one and such an amazing one to have at the age of 17. We couldn't go to the pub with the rest of the office because we weren't old enough. So that was a really good starting place. And then I went to uni and I actually studied film for 2 years. And then I started to really get into, what role do I want to do here and where do I see myself in this industry? And I quickly realized that I didn't really want to touch a camera, that there were so many other avenues within this. And I wanted to do the business side of filmmaking, which is ultimately producing. And so I thought, actually, this course doesn't teach me that. I'm going to jump ship to business. So I jumped ship to business in the same university and finished my degree in business. And then I did a master's in business. So, and then when I was always still trying to keep my toe in the water. I lived with people who were on the film course, and then my dissertation was about the Scottish film industry. So I was always kind of trying to bring it back to film one way or another. I wasn't just changing what I was doing. And then just as we finished uni, we decided, right, we're going to set up a business. And because we'd been working part-time, just freelancing the whole way through uni, we hadn't, neither of us had part-time jobs, so we'd just been like, right, we'll film this and we'll film that, we'll do this for 100 quid, and just doing absolutely everything. We thought, right, we've got the skills and experience now to jump ship and do this as a business. So 6 months before I left uni, set up the business, and then here we are 5 years later. And in the last 5 years we've made a lot, so maybe that's what qualifies me.
Okay, that sounds like it qualifies you. The thing is, there's a guy, I always say this at this point, there's a guy I spoke to, Tony Morris, And he's
Okay.
like, because I always say, like I said to you before we started speaking, like everyone's got on average 20 years experience. There's 1,000 years of experience here. But Tony Morris's thing is he could have done something for 20 years and been really bad at it. Do you know what I mean? I'd rather have 5 minutes of excellent experience than 20 years of bad experience. Or that wasn't the exact words that he used. But it's that idea. So the thing about video production, I think, is that doesn't everyone want to be in video production? So doesn't just the fact that you are employed in your business or your business is employed and is working with these brands and you are doing this all day, every day, that qualify, because quite a lot of people go qualification, they think certificates. I couldn't care less about certificates. I'm like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, and I think once, you know, there's maybe when you first enter the industry, you're like, oh God, this isn't the place for me. But I think every time you make a mistake and then you learn from that, and then the next time you do that thing better, you feel the imposter syndrome goes away quick. Every time you do something, it just goes away. And so you begin to feel qualified in yourself. And then I think as clients start to come back to you and say, you know you're great at what you do, we want you back. I think that's the biggest compliment a client can give us is we want you back is great. So yeah, for sure. I don't think it needs to just be a qualification. And to my parents' despair, I have never once shown my degree certificate to anybody. So maybe that was a waste of time. I don't know.
Okay, so I'm interested in this idea of the film industry because
Hmm.
it's notoriously difficult.
Yeah.
I don't even want to say difficult. I want to say sketchy. Is it sketchy?
Well, I wanted to work in film, I wanted to go and do big features, and that was kind of my dream. And then I came out of uni and we'd started the business. We hadn't really thought really about the future when we started the business. We just were like, oh, this seems like a cool idea. And then a couple of people had got in touch just through word of mouth, like, oh, do you want to come and be a runner on this? And, production assistant on this. And they were big shows. And I just started to think, like, do do I want to do that? I remember going to an interview that I thought was for dailies, which is like, you just go for a day's shoot here and there as and when they need you. But actually it was an interview for, 16 weeks, 14-hour days in the middle of winter, an hour away from my house. And I just was like, I don't know if I want this. I don't know if I want this lifestyle because I'm not going to see any of my friends. I was in my early 20s. I'm like, I want to enjoy myself. And so I kind of really went back to the drawing board. Between that experience and a couple of others, I'd applied for some short film funding as well. And well, this was about a year later actually, and hadn't got it, but got very close to getting it. And I was like, well, why am I doing this? Like, why do I want to be in this industry? And what I came down to was I want to make good stuff and I want people to be affected by that content. And then because you do that, you want people to see the content. And actually, I think when you're potentially, not everybody, but if you're making shorts and you're making features, the audience size for that isn't necessarily going to be massive. Whereas when you're making online content, it really opens up the whole world. And so that's when I decided, right, actually, you can do this commercially, you can see your friends, you can have a good lifestyle, you can earn the money you want to earn, and you can actually make good stuff that people are going to see. And that's kind of where I just was like, right, this is my career, this is what I want. So
Yeah. So I think that's what I mean by sketchy. It is notoriously like people really want to be in the film industry, like the feature
Mhm.
film industry,
Yeah,
and it's kind of exploitative, I think, of people, and so it will make demands beyond health and safety or beyond reasonable
yeah.
working hours or those kinds of things. That's what I mean about sketchy. You've just reminded me. I had a friend called Al, and in the early '90s, probably by the way you're talking, you don't really know much about the early '90s, but he was a runner on the Big Breakfast with Denise Van Outen. And
Mhm.
I saw my mate about 20 years later. He was housemates with this guy, and he was
Okay.
a runner on the Big Breakfast. And then, so I saw him like 20 years later, and we're chatting. And he's like, "Oh, remind me, I'm going to tell you about Damon." So it's like, okay, we're chatting. And then later on, I'm thinking, oh God, about Damon. Either he's got some horrible disease, or he's gay, or it's like something not necessarily. Anyway, so we get to the end. I was like, so what about Damon? He's like, oh, he wrote The In-Betweeners.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So that was a bit of a shock because he went off and got himself a BAFTA in the 20 years since I'd seen him.
That's
And
insane.
and me and Al were just still sitting in cafes having breakfast and drinking cups of tea. But it is notoriously difficult, like the industry like that. So it's
Yeah.
interesting that you identified the need for. Is that offensive to you that my hand is overexposed when it's there because it's so much closer to the light?
No, not to me, but it might be to someone on the team.
Okay. What did I want to say? So the business, it's interesting that you twigged that you needed to know about business if you were going to be in the film business. Because
Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't think a lot of people twig that, do they?
No, and I think maybe because my business partner is really the creative in the business, and so he's very camera focused and edit focused, and how are we going to make this look amazing? And so I was always focused on, well, how do you make all of these lives, these creative lives easier? How do you make sure they're fed and watered, but so that they can do all this great creative stuff. And then gradually from, the logistics of that, then it built up to, well, then how do we make money? And, all of this kind of stuff, which I actually am just in my element in that. I think like it's important to be, um, business minded. And actually, if you want the lifestyle that we have and that we have wanted for a long time, of being able to go out and go on holiday. I'm not saying that we need to own a mansion or anything, but I think it's really important to understand what your vision is and then have that business acumen to go with it. Because I think we all saw this in the pandemic, where if you've got your basic needs taken away, whether that be money or in some cases food and water, how do you then have like creative freedom? Like that's kind of at the it's not like an absolutely essential need, so it's like for me supporting those creative people, and our clients through the money and the business side of things enables them to flourish and do all the other fun stuff. Does that make sense? I feel that was a ramble.
Yeah, 100%. That makes sense because nothing happens. So we're getting towards maybe the marketing aspect that I'm interested in. But as in any business, nothing happens unless there's money coming in. Do you know what I mean? So
Yeah,
unless you have customers who are paying invoices, you're not
yeah.
in business. You're really not in business. So that makes perfect sense to me. And then I don't really know what a producer is or what an executive producer is.
Um,
Like, yeah, you tell me because I don't know.
So in, I suppose my role and then big films is quite significantly different. On big
Okay.
films, a producer would bring in the money, so they would from the start. Say for example, a producer sees a fiction film, a fiction book that they really like the idea of. They would maybe go out to the writer of that book and do what's called an option, and they would say, "Oh, can I have the right to use this book as a film?" Then they would go out and find a film writer. They'd maybe write a treatment. The writer would maybe write a treatment for them, and then the producer would go out and get money to make that film. I mean, that's just very oversimplified of what they would do, but that's kind of their role, is to get the film off the ground. And then when the film is off the ground, they're managing everything, the budget and people, but then they will have a whole production team to help them with that. So there's different kind of producers that sit within that, and then they get that all the way to the very end where they're selling it to distributors, and the producer can often be on that film for years and years longer than anybody else, because they've been there since day one, and then they're there right to the very end where it's getting sold, whether that be through Amazon Prime or through a DVD, but that wouldn't happen now. So not DVD. I suppose my role is like a much smaller version of that. So you know, I go out and get the client usually, with support from the creative team, I'm kind of constantly building those relationships to say, okay, well, what can we do here, and who can we go to? And then when the client comes in, I would do a pitch with the creative team, but usually my role in that pitch is like schedule, budget, what does everybody need? Can we meet the budget that the client have said without the creatives going absolutely crazy and spending millions of pounds, because the client doesn't have millions of pounds? And then managing the production, so making sure everything's on time, on schedule, on budget. And actually, because we're quite a small team, I quite like doing all the other things that, on a big film, that a producer would have a big production team. I don't mind doing all the small little things like driving the van. I quite enjoy driving a van, to be honest, and just helping out. And I think that's something that we're quite keen in our culture. Our director will come and get coffees with me, and we'll bring them back for the crew, because we don't want there to be that weird hierarchy that there is in a lot of big productions. I mean, we still have to have some level of, that's your responsibility, that's my responsibility, but we don't want it to be like, right, well, there's going to be a queue of who's going to have lunch first by order of importance, because that does happen, so
Yeah. And I think this is the thing that people don't appreciate necessarily about video, about how much work video actually is. And
yeah.
it's an insane amount of work. Like, I had a client who was a video production when we were a marketing company properly and we were doing marketing. And I think he told me that the industry standard was £1,000 per minute produced. Now, this was 20 years ago, so I don't know if it's changed since then. But that, at that time, just sounded to me like a ridiculously, stupidly huge amount of money. But now, because I do a bit of photography and I want to produce videos, but
Mhm.
it's too much work, is the
It is a huge
problem.
amount of work, yeah. And I think once you start to do certain things over and over again, they get easier, and so we get quicker at it.
Yes.
But it does take a long time, and I think also, like, every project is bespoke. We don't do packages or anything like that. And so, for example, you take a day of talking heads. That's probably the most simple thing that we would do, of just a bunch of people talking to camera or talking to an interviewer, off screen. And even that is like, it really depends on who the client is, how we're going to light this. Some clients request that there's makeup, which they absolutely should do for those kind of things, particularly if someone's not an actor. Or is it going to be an actor? Is it not? Is it going to be scripted? Is it not? Like, there's so many variables within that. Just someone's just talking to camera. Do you know? So then when you get into bigger things, like, we need a horse, and we need, a drone, and we need all these other things, then it's even bigger. So
Yeah.
yeah. And I think it's explaining that to people, and the value, which I suppose is your next question. And actually, then how you price things. We've done a lot of, I suppose, webinars and training on how you price things, because I think people do that, where they go, how much? And you're like, well, there's a reason why. It's not just that that there's not a huge markup on all of those costs. There's a reason why, and everything's got to be safe, and everybody's got to be paid properly, and all of those things. And yeah, it's explaining that value, I think, is really, really important.
Yeah. Okay. So what did you think my next question was going to be? Is what is the value of
Value,
video?
yeah, yeah.
So I
That was
think video is somewhere between 25 times and where are we up to? 960 times per second more than an image. It's
yeah, yeah.
like, yeah,
The last time I looked this up was a couple of years ago, pre-pandemic, and I think it was around 25 times then. So more effective than an image. And I suppose that's because you're engaging with who you see on screen and what you see, and you're identifying with something that's a bit more real life than a photo. Um, so I think the value is definitely the engagement. And we can talk about all the stats and the analytics and the business side of that, which I'm very much into. But I think the big thing is story. People connect with other people and the stories that they are told. It's such a fundamental human need to connect with others and storytelling. And so I think if we can do that for a brand, then that's when it becomes really special, actually, because then you've got a brand that's telling a story, and they're engaging with their audience, and then their audience then will choose to engage with them back. And whether that means that they choose to buy something or interact in another way, that's kind of then up to the brand. But I think the storytelling is the most important part of it.
Yeah. I've got a theory that I think would bring about peace in the Middle East. Are you interested?
Yeah, okay.
You know, I don't know if you watch game shows, if anyone watches game shows anymore, but they do all the music and the lights and all this stuff. And then I'm always thinking, I don't really care about these people. But then they introduce them for like a minute. Oh, like, where are you from? Have you got kids? What do you do for a living? And then you really care about those people already. Do you know what I mean? And so
Yeah.
I think they should have, like, with all the different factions from the Middle East, they should have game shows with all these different factions on them. And then people will start caring about each other more. That's my thing.
Yep.
So I've always really been really excited about video from a marketing sense. And what I did is, in about 2006, is I started shooting video testimonials with my customers. And it was on my phone, and it was 2006. So you can imagine, like, the specs on the phone. And it was hugely beneficial because, I mean, it helped me apart from anything else, because I had like 5 questions. I've only ever got 5 questions. But they would always, you know, look, why did you decide to use us, was like always a really powerful question. And it was like the Daz adverts, apart from these people weren't being paid to say this, and I didn't know what they were going to say. Do you know what I mean? But
Yeah.
it is amazing. The issue with that is that I always used to get in trouble with video production companies, because so they'd say the video production wasn't good. Of course it wasn't. It was on my phone. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So no, I don't need to be. I really get the value of video. And I think you're right. It's about communicating the story, isn't it? It's about communicating something. Because I'd say I do actually do photography. And then what they say is your photo has to tell a story. And that's just BS, because a photo can't tell a story. Do you know what I mean? I mean, you think about the most archetypal photos in history. Okay, maybe 0.0000001% of a single frame will tell an entire story. But if you want to tell a story, you need frames. You need, there needs to be trajectory. There needs to be movement. There needs to be.
For photography, you can definitely create a feeling, but
Yes.
whether you can create a full story, I agree with you. But I think we decided a while ago that we would take disposable cameras on shoots with us and just give them to a couple of the crew, just take a load of snaps, and some of the funniest photos we have got are from just these little disposable cameras, and they kind of just create a nice, it's not just like a phone shot that you can look at. Like, you've had to wait 2 weeks to get that back, and I think, oh, that's not a story, but it's like a feeling. It's a feeling of how much fun we had, on a job.
Yes.
And there's something about waiting to get it back, which you obviously have to do with video as well, usually.
Yes.
In terms of, like, you have to wait for an edit to materialize before you see all the work come together. But yeah, I don't think it can tell a full story. But if you were then to go and look at someone's Instagram and it's all really consistent, is that a story? I don't know.
Yeah, but this is what I'm saying is about video being. So I'm not even saying better. Like, video starts at somewhere around 25 frames per second. So that's 25 photos for every second. And it goes up to, like, Lord knows, thousands of frames per second. So that's where you get a story. And I think if it's over time, like, then if it's a series of photos, then a series of photos can start to tell a story, I think. But really, if you want a story, you need video.
Yeah.
And it's not easy to do. So I want to get back to this production values thing.
Yeah.
Because it seems to me, I don't know, but it seems to me that the art, like the creativity that goes into video, is, is creating those situations entirely. Do you know what I mean? Like mine was, I'd literally say something nice about my company. You know, here's 5 questions, answer these questions. And so it was completely natural and it was completely fine. But typically what's going on in a produced video is it's not natural at all. And then the people have to, the creativity is in making it seem natural. And where
Yeah.
people fail is where they fail to make it seem natural.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I think firstly, on your first point about you doing stuff on your phone, I think there's such a space for that. You know, I think we almost fell into this trap, or maybe did a few times, where um you know, you'd see a client that maybe we work with doing something on their phone, and we're like, what are they doing? Why are they not getting us to come and do it? You know, we could do a better job
Yes.
than that. Like, well, why wouldn't they do it on their phone? They've got one. They need to get a message out quickly. Let them do that, you know? Why would they spend however much money on getting us to come and do it? Let them save a bit of that money and come and get us to do something bigger that needs the big production value, you know? And I think when you start to look at marketing strategy or video strategy, it's like, actually, if you just, I mean, this is something we used to say to small businesses a lot. It's like, if you just get one video done and you just plonk it on Instagram or Facebook or wherever, that's not going to engage people. Having lots of small bits of content and then one beautiful bit of content, or you know, with cut downs, and we do a lot of cut downs and that kind of thing as well, that's going to make that one bigger bit perform better, because there's lots of little bits and you've kept that personality and that brand and that story going throughout. You're not just saying here's one bit of content and then going. Do you know what I mean?
I know 100% what you mean. And the thing is, what's the thing about that? It's like the platforms, we haven't spoken about platforms. I don't know where you're putting your videos, but platforms want content. So the more
Yeah.
regularly you are providing them with content, the more they're going to
Yeah.
reward you with
Yeah.
views. So, you know, that makes absolute sense. And I think the thing about them shooting something with their phone is that I say this to people. I teach digital marketing is what I do. And what I tell people, because I'm a revolutionary communist and a Marxist, is like, you now have the means of production. You already have the phone. Buy a microphone for 30 quid and buy a tripod for 20 quid, and you are
Yeah.
producing 4K video. Do you know what I mean? And that, in 2006, when I started with whatever my camera was on that phone, you know, a revolution has happened in the technology. But if they produce the video and they get the kick out of having done the video, and then they share the video and they get some
Mm-hmm.
positive feedback, then that is teaching people the value of video, I think. So I'm with you 100%. I think people should be producing video all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what people say, isn't it? And this is
And
kind of, yeah,
sorry, that's where there's then a space also for like one of our clients, we do usually about a campaign a year for them now. One big campaign, we did like a big footage bank for them last year, and that means that they can constantly reuse the content that we created in one style for them. But then they also have, I think, another couple of people that will just go out and grab vox pops for them, and we wouldn't do that because it's not really in our wheelhouse anymore. But they're constantly creating, and they've found a really good way of having a footage bank, but also you know, a cheaper way of getting constant content in the, you know, vox pop kind of sphere. And I think that works really, really well, and we wouldn't not work with them on that basis. You know, it's like, oh well, they're working with someone else. It's like, no,
yeah.
let someone be good at one part and someone else be good in another part, because we probably wouldn't be that good at vox pops anymore, because we have a big camera and we would light it, and that's not what they want. They want it raw and ready, and that's
Yes,
okay.
yes. And more organic or authentic or, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
See,
Um,
yeah.
I was just going to say I didn't answer your question a couple of questions ago, so I was going to say
What was the question?
I can't remember.
Well, then Lord help us. We can't go back. I don't know which question it was that you didn't answer.
I'm going
Um,
to get.
the thing is, I think about video is the best example of just starting. Just do it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like
yeah, for sure.
the value to me of video is that this is by far and away the easiest way to produce content. Like, I'm not talking about beautifully produced, but I'm just talking about producing content. So if you put a camera in somebody's face and you start asking them questions, they will want to give you really good answers. Do you know what I mean? They will want to, so they will have that impetus. And if you are, and it's really not difficult, you can go to Google and Google, like they do this now on the TV shows, don't they? Like Google's most asked questions and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So you can see the questions that people want answers to. You can put a camera in front of somebody and you can start producing content. And then as a marketer, I'm interested to see that go into text or into audio or to go, so it can go everywhere. Do you know what I mean? So that's the thing. And I think the thing about creativity also is that you just have to start. So I'll tell you where my testimonials ended up. Well, firstly, my wife, when there were 30 or 40 or 50 of these things on my website, said that I looked desperate, so I had to stop doing it. That's part of the reason we're not married anymore. But where this ended up was one day I got a call from a mate of mine who was running an exhibition. And he's like, look, I've got a stand if you want it for tomorrow. And I'm like, surprisingly, I'm busy tomorrow. But, and he's like, well, just do something with this stand because, what can you do? So we literally went and we put a computer there with a screen and a vase for people to put their business cards in. And we set up these testimonials on a loop on the video screen. And it was literally, the question was, guess how many times our customers use the word effective when they're talking about the effective marketing company. And at this point, it was hours. Like each one was 3 minutes long, but it was like the loop was probably, it might have been like an hour and 40 minutes. So there were definitely like 40 or 50 of these. So anyway, we just left it. I couldn't be there. I went at the back at the end of the day. The vase is overflowing and there's business cards like all over the table and falling onto the floor. And the other guys were breaking up. And they're like, it was insane how many people were on your stand all day trying to guess what the number might be. And we weren't even there to see it. So, but then what we had to do is we had to chop all of the effectives out of this video. So it'd be like, effective marketing's certainly been effective for us. And like, we've never worked with anyone as effective as the effective. Do you know what I mean? And it was just brilliant content. Yeah. So what's the point of that? The point is that video is the easiest way, I think, to be producing content and the most useful way, because once you've got the video, then you can pull out the text and you can pull out the audio and you can pull out the images if that's what you want to do, So that's why I think
about like, so everybody else who stood at that stand probably hovering, like not your stand, like everybody else who was at the event who had a stand would have been like watching people walk past, being like, are they going to come over? Are they going to come over? Okay, right, here's the sale that I'm going to give you. Whereas I think one thing that video can do, which you clearly did there, is like you're just pulling people in. You're not like forcing something down their throat. You're just saying, bam, here it is. And so I think online there's an equivalent of that. If you start pushing like a really hard sale, obviously you can push a hard sale within video, but I think if you do video properly and you build a brand and you build a story with it, then you actually will pull people into that rather than just being like, hey, do you want my product?
Yes, and 100%. And there's a guy who I've interviewed twice. He's the only person I've interviewed twice, Barnaby Winter. He's the guy behind like all the UK household names, like all the big brands. And what he'll tell you is they weren't big brands until he worked with them. And I believe him 100%. And he's like, basically, if you are out looking for customers, you're completely wasting your time. You need to be positioning yourself and attracting those customers, because in 2022, who doesn't know what they want to buy? Do you know what I mean? So you've got to be working ahead of time to be influencing that decision that they know what they want to buy. Video is hugely, hugely powerful. And I don't know if everybody knows that yet.
Yeah. Well, actually, we about a year and a half ago now decided that we wanted to just concentrate on one audience, because when we first started, we had a lot of experience filming events, and so it felt very natural that we set up the business and we'd film a lot of events. And we kind of had wanted to move out of that for quite a long time, because actually what we felt was when we did an event, you go, you do the event, it's really exciting, and then this video would go up 2 weeks later, and then it was kind of just done, until the following year. You didn't really get to have a push on, it wasn't really marketing actually. You didn't get to, if you did it the following year, then you maybe got to say, right, we're going to make this video from last year's footage to influence ticket sales. But beyond that, you didn't really get that much of an influence. And so we were like, we want to be doing much more proactive branded content where we get to, do a product launch before a product comes out, for example. And so we really racked our brains around. I mean, also there was then COVID, which meant that all of our event work was zero. So that forced us into this situation. But really good that it did. And we said, well, who needs video content that's kind of already sold on it? Because I think now, compared to even 2 years ago, we're in a really different space. I think 2 years ago, brands were a bit unsure about it and like, okay, well, it's a nice to have. Whereas we were like, who's already sold on video being a good idea? And we decided that it would be other creative agencies. So creative agencies that do the whole thing, the full service agencies that do the branding, they do the photos, they do video, blah, 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 but they don't have video in-house. And so we were like, we can be that partner for those people. And so we were like, let's concentrate on those agencies. And we picked a list of about 20 in Edinburgh that we wanted to really concentrate on. And that has just meant the business has flown in that time. It's insane to say we're just focusing on one audience. But they also get that value. They understand the value of video. You're not trying to persuade them that they need this. And then the things that you are talking to them about are like, well, how do we help you with production? You've got this cool idea, but how do we make that come to life? We've got a really interesting one at the moment that I can't talk about, but which I'll send you for the time that this comes out because we'll have made it by then. But like, how do we make this concept actually up on its feet? And so that's, in terms of our own marketing, that's been a really interesting thing to do. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Because that is what I'm interested in also, is because everybody wants to be a film production company or a video production company.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little bit like web design. Everybody knows a web developer. Like everyone probably has a nephew who's a web developer. So it's not like everyone has a decent camera these days. You don't
Yeah.
have to spend huge amounts of money to be getting really decent footage. Okay, so that's maybe what's gone on. Is there's been a real what's the words? There's been a huge distribution of knowledge around video production
Yeah.
and photography and all of these things. And it's because of YouTube. And
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
so there's that other aspect where people are not wanting to be video production or being video production companies, but producing video for themselves because YouTube will pay them. So I
Yeah.
suppose it's interesting. I want to say there's been like, it's not like a democratization. There's been a democratization of the knowledge. There's been a real, or certainly the knowledge has become much more accessible. The question I want to ask is, it's notoriously difficult then to market creative businesses anyway. And I would argue, there's a fly, I would argue, he's gone. He didn't die either. So I would argue that it's so hugely, hugely competitive and everyone wants to do it. And like in terms of, I think the issue with marketing, I'm getting to the question, I promise you. I think the issue with marketing a creative agency, any kind of creative, is
Mm-hmm.
you don't really have that value proposition. Like
Mm-hmm.
the value proposition might, like me, I'm gonna make your business more profitable by reducing your cost of customer acquisition, blah 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 blah. That's my
Mm-hmm.
value proposition. Your
Mm-hmm.
value proposition or your offering is simply you're gonna like what we produce much more than those others. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Which, yeah, we've spent quite a long time working on it, and I think it's much more about, okay, it's funny because it is video or service, or is it a product? Because you receive something, it is a digital product at the end of the day. But actually, for us, it's much more about a service. Like, these people are going to spend a lot of time with us. You need to get on with us, and you need to kind of see the same vision for the content that we have. And I think that's where it works the most. And that's what we would say our value proposition is about bringing their, sorry, it's a bit corny, but like bringing their idea to life, and working alongside them. And so sometimes that bringing their idea to life means that I've got to go and do a massive risk assessment because their idea is really crazy in terms of the health and safety, and so that's, or a creative agency that perhaps, we've only done one of these, but a creative agency that has one video person in house that they, as you say, can go and film it themselves, but they need to source the locations and the people and the actors. And so we use all of our partners that we know, and our suppliers, to make that come to life. And so I think that's the value for us. And actually, we have a couple of clients at the moment that aren't with creative agencies; they're with other creative companies, which is amazing. And they're similar, they've just got a vision, and then we say, right, how do we bring this to life? And that's kind of, that, I suppose, is how our value proposition comes together, I would say.
Yeah, so I think, like, no disrespect at all, but
Yeah.
actually a lot of this is quite boring, sensible stuff.
Yeah.
Making sure the right people are in the right place with the right kit and the right,
Yeah.
do you know what I mean? So there
And
is.
actually, I think so many people overlook those things. And one big thing that we are really big on is, I mean, it's just such a simple thing, but it's paying freelancers on time, because so many people don't do that. We're like, we do this within, we have cut-off dates, and we're transparent about when there's going to be a pay run. Because I've done jobs when I was a student as a runner that's waiting like 6 months to get paid 120 quid,
Yes,
and it's
yes.
like, we don't want to do that. And then secondary to treating people correctly and making sure people are having fun on set and those kind of things is then making sure we treat the planet correctly too. And film production can have a huge impact on the planet, particularly in these massive productions. You've got huge amounts of travel, you've got huge amounts of just people eating and wasting, and then you've got like energy. And so it actually is really, really simple, but it's so many people don't do those things, and we want to create a culture that is enjoyable for everybody, including us. It has to start with us at the end of the day.
Yeah, and for the client, I think also it needs to be fun for the client.
Yeah, it does, because like a while ago, one of our camera assistants was late because he'd left a little bit late and then got stuck in the bus lane had opened, and was overly late. And then I just like, just don't worry about it. Like, okay, ideally don't be late, but it happens. Like, you're not about to save a life. We're just making content at the end of the day. Like, don't feel scared, and to a point where you're going to drive irrationally to get to set. Like, you'll get here when you get here. But I think there's not that attitude across the industry. It's like, oh my god, we need to be here now. It's like, well, we'll manage.
It is awful, the industry. Like, I mean, it is awful. Like, it's awful. Like, I'm thinking about, like, from the very top, like when you see these people and they have to do, like, the actors have to go out and do these promo tours and talk about how, like, all the quirky, fun things that happen and how they all have such a great relationship and all this BS. Do you know what I mean? So there has to be story about the story. But then I've been to see, like, TV shows being produced. I
Mhm.
went to see The Last Leg, but I imagine this happens with all of them. And it was like such a self-congratulatory kind of, aren't we great? Like, look at
Yeah.
us producing the magic. I mean, maybe other people do think that they are really great and really enjoy that aspect of it, but I don't. you know, I I I want to watch something beautiful, but I can't imagine like Clint Eastwood and Lee Van Cleef and Sergio Leone and all sitting around going, "Oh, wasn't it funny when we shot that scene?" And he said something. You know what I mean, it's like they wouldn't have done it. So there's. I think what I'm objecting to is like the whole affectation around it. But I think that kind of permeates because you've got so many creatives, and I don't know, maybe that just permeates it. Maybe it's not useful for
Yeah,
us to talk
yeah.
about that now.
But I think just being down to earth, it's quite funny now we're thinking about the vision for the company, and I'm like, well, I don't want to be like 20 people. I don't want like, okay, on a set we might be 20, but I don't want to be employing 20 because I think that's when it can become like, oh God, we've got to bring this money in and we've got to do this and we've got to
Yes.
do that. You know, let's just try and keep it as organic as we can so that we can have that space to have fun. I think, there was a place where we were a couple of years ago where we didn't have enough people in order to have fun whilst we were making stuff because there was two of us doing about seven people's jobs, and that equally wasn't as fun. But I don't want to become this massive, massive video agency that just makes stuff for the sake of making because we've got overheads to pay.
Yeah, and this has become a recurring theme in these conversations, which is I don't know why, but there is something about starting a business and being a business owner where it has to be about continuous growth.
Yeah.
More customers, more staff, more money, more offices, more desks, more computers, more whatever, whatever, whatever. And I
Mhm.
don't know how true this is, but I like your approach where you're like, okay, if this is what you're saying is, let's just get this to a comfortable place, and
Yeah, yeah. And I think what we want to do is like we want to have we want to have more fun, we want to treat people right, we want to be paid well, and also then the big goal then is how do we be more creatively ambitious? That's actually the constant vision of like let's be more ambitious, but it doesn't mean to say that I think if you were to grow in numbers and people and money and offices, then that would actually take that creative ambition away, you know?
I think it
Um,
would, because then what you do, what every business does, is it creates a monster that needs feeding,
yeah,
and
yeah, yeah,
and then it's all about how do we feed this monster, and it's
yeah,
not. I mean, maybe yours is the best example of it, where feeding the monster is damaging to the business because, like you say, you're going to end up producing stuff you don't want to produce, and then you're going to have to produce more stuff you don't want to produce. Do you know what I mean? That's
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I think that's exactly it. Having mouths to feed isn't a really good idea. Okay.
And but sorry as well. Then there's other people that we work with, like say like makeup artists, that would absolutely not make sense for us to employ full-time makeup artists because we don't need them all the time. But
Yes.
really enjoy working with them and they're great at their job and we need them. So having that flexibility of having two or three makeup artists that we get on really, really well with and they're just great at their jobs. But then they can go and do other stuff and we can do other
Yes.
stuff. That makes so much more sense rather than saying, oh, okay, we're going to have this makeup artist full time. Oh, but 3 days a week you're not doing anything. So then we're going to try and shoehorn makeup into a shoot that doesn't need makeup. Why would you do
Yeah,
that?
it doesn't make sense. So this is probably the best instance of like the gig economy, isn't it? Where
Yeah.
actually, yeah,
And I think also then for our clients, when our clients are creative agencies, it doesn't make, for many of them anyway, it doesn't make sense for them to have an in-house video team.
no,
They might have an in-house video person, and there's many things that that person can go out and film on their own. But when it comes to the bigger stuff, it really doesn't make sense for them to have that in-house.
no,
Um, and so that's where we can partner, and then also that means that they do exactly what we do. They get the video content for the exciting projects. They don't just try and make a video project, sorry, a not video project, a video project,
yes,
when,
yes,
you know what I mean,
yes,
when it doesn't need to be.
because they have mouths to feed and hands to keep busy. That becomes
Yeah.
the issue. Okay, cool. I really like the sound of it. It sounds. I would love to have been a video production company. I'm not serious enough, is the truth, and I'm not sensible enough. That's probably it. Because I would shoot for 6 weeks and then they'd never see me again. So that is also part of the proposition, isn't it? Is actually delivering something, because
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
difficult to deliver something, and I think there are probably a lot of agencies whose delivery isn't quite. This is the reason, like, also I'd struggle to be a video production company because my vision when I start is always stupid. Like, it doesn't matter what I start. If I start a presentation, if I start decorating the house, or if I start whatever I start doing, I start off with this monolithic, epic vision of it has to be like that. And I start with all earnestness. And then at some point, I'll just realize the complete futility. I'm not going to achieve anything like I was hoping to achieve. And then I will just bail. Um, so
But
there
loads of
is,
creative people do that.
yeah, no, I'm sure. And there is something wrong with that. It's like you're living in a house that is only 10% decorated. Do you know what I mean? That 10% might be fabulous, but it's not. It's just
And then you're
sustainable.
still climbing over all this
Yeah,
DIY
yeah.
across the same
And then
time. Yeah.
always, when people come to visit, you're having to entertain them in the upstairs loo because that's the only place that's decent. Good. We took that analogy as far as it could go. I'm interested in, like, because this whole thing has become so much more available with the advent of YouTube and Vimeo and all those other video channels, and, the kit and the proliferation of people talking about how you do this and people having the freedom to do it. It just seems to me that there has been a complete explosion in this.
Hmm.
If you look at where it was 25 years ago, you had to be the ITV, you had to be ITV or BBC to have an outdoor, what do they call them? A roving camera crew or
Yeah,
something.
yeah, like
Whereas
outdoor
now I am a roving camera crew. Do you know what I mean? It's like, and
yeah.
everybody is. So, what's your feeling about that? Did you ever think we should just be Casey Neistat and we should just produce like daily vlogs, or be Peter McKinnon and produce something beautiful every 3 weeks? Or I don't know. Are
Um,
those?
Interesting. Yeah, no, we essentially talk about like testimonials and stuff. A lot of people in the early days told us like, yeah, you should do vlogs and you should do testimonials, and we're like, no, we want what the vision, which I feel like we're just reaching this point. It was for people to be able to come to us because let the work speak for itself. That was our big thing. And our website, which just launched a few weeks ago, finally it felt like this is a website that allows that. It's quite quirky in the way it handles video and these kind of things. It's not saying like this is what we're really good at and you should come to us. It's not like too salesy. It's like, we need to tell the story about ourselves, and then we can do the same for you and tell these slightly more subtle stories, like a little bit more humble than that. Obviously we've got to talk about ourselves, but yeah, not too salesy. So yeah, we always thought the slightly more slow and steady approach and do it properly rather than cutting corners. That was always the kind of content that we wanted to make.
Yes.
Saying that, we do go through very, very busy periods. But we now can say quite confidently to clients, like, if you want to do this, you should do it in 2 days rather than one. You can do it in one, but it's not going to be nearly as good as if you do it in two. And 9 times out of 10, clients absolutely respect that.
Yeah.
It's not that we're trying to make more money out of them by saying that. It's just saying like, you don't want to spend one day of budget and then not use it. you know.
Yes.
Um,
Yes. Yes.
yeah, yeah.
And so I
Does
think
that
that
answer?
goes back to, which is where I want to go next anyway, but it goes back to that idea of how you market yourselves. And where I've advised creative companies, it's like just get your stuff in front of people who use stuff like that. I mean, that's almost the
Yeah,
best that you can do, because
yeah,
you don't want to be saying, you definitely don't want to be saying how great you are, because, as a video production company, that's also really vomit inducing. It's just like there's too many lovies already on our screens talking about how
yeah,
great they are. Do you know what I mean? We don't need more of
yeah.
those.
But
So
yeah, getting your work out into the world, that's the biggest thing. There's one or two projects last year that were like, this isn't, it's not exactly the vision we had for it. But in times gone by, we maybe wouldn't have put it out at all. We were like,
yeah,
no, it's still a good piece of work, and some people really like it. It's maybe not the piece of content that we really wanted to watch, but it's really important that people still see that, because I think
yes,
it also just shows that what you're willing to try, and that you're busy, and that you're testing things, and it doesn't need to be perfect all the time. Gareth, who introduced us, once said to me, it should be prolific over perfect. And I have held that. Like,
yeah,
we when you're overthinking something and you're like, this needs to be perfect. I'm like, no, it just needs to go out. And then after that you can change it, because you'll do different versions of it, but this
Yes.
maybe that's a bit different with client work. But like, for example, we ran a series of events about pricing content for agencies, and the first one, I would not want to watch that back. I personally felt it was horrendous. It probably wasn't as horrendous as I thought it was, but it was done, and then we've done three more pricing ones, but then we added other topics in there, and now I think since sort of November time we've done seven or eight, and we've got work from them. But if we hadn't just started,
Yes.
then and just got it out, because I could have sat there for weeks being like, this needs to be perfect, and it was never going to be perfect, the first one, but we've got it much better.
Yeah. So Peter McKinnon does this as well, doesn't he? He says done is better than perfect. And I think that is because actually perfect doesn't exist. Do you know what I mean?
No,
Or perfect
yeah,
doesn't see the light of day is certainly the
yeah,
truth. Do you know what I mean? You will get hit by a bus before you produce something that's actually perfect.
yeah, yeah.
Um, but the question I was actually asking is about whether you looked at that as a model. If you thought we could just produce our own content for
uh,
YouTube, get paid by YouTube, do merch or like that whole business, but that's not something that you thought about?
no, I mean, we did it. Maybe at one point I was maybe like, this could be money. do you
Yeah.
know but very quickly my business partner Ethan would have been like, absolutely not. And it's like trusting his creative judgment, I think, is really, really
Yes.
important. No, we never properly entertained that. I think other things that we did entertain were like retainer models, which Ethan dug his heels in a bit about that, and actually I think we found a really nice happy medium now, because I didn't want to do just one-off projects, because they take a huge amount of work to get them,
Yeah.
and then it's one-off, and then there you go again. But he didn't want to do retainers because, say for example, you have a certain number of hours with a client, then you end up doing that thing that we just spoke about, where you're just creating content because you've got a certain number of hours to fill.
Filler.
Um, yeah. So now what we do is we do like slightly longer term projects, where we say, right, we're going to make a series of, for example, at the moment, 6 videos. Um, this is for uh, this is for basically an agency that supports other businesses, and so we are making different business case studies for them, and we'll do that over the space of a few months, and so that's really, really exciting to then say, okay, we've got 6 smaller projects over the space of the next 4 months. We know exactly we can put them in, and we can put that in a timeline. So there's a purpose and there's a reason why, but it's not retainer, but also it gives me a bit of peace of mind on the money, and so
Yeah.
then it's good.
There's some forecastable income, which is really good, I think.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay, good. Do you want the good news?
yeah.
I think you are eminently qualified to talk to us about video production. So now we can go to question number 2. So
Oh my
question
god.
number 2 is, it's all right. You've given us kind of lots of these answers already. But who do you work with? How do you add value to their lives? So I
Um,
suppose the question is kind of, we've got a sense of the kinds of clients you work with. The real, yeah. So this is interesting to me. Is what is the value that they need? Do you know what I mean? What is it that you do that they can't do for themselves?
yeah, I suppose first and foremost, it's creative agencies, or other creative businesses, um, that need that need content. They have a vision for the content, but they don't have the skills, the knowledge, the partners to make that come to life, I would say.
Okay, they need content for themselves or they need content for their clients?
They need content for their clients.
Okay, 100%.
Yeah,
Good.
most of the time. So like creative agencies need content for their clients. There's another company we're working with at the moment that the content is for them, but it's ultimately for their marketing team, who the marketing team are not wildly dissimilar to a creative agency if you look at it like that. And then it's for for the whole business.
Yes.
So um yeah, it's they're achieving a different vision. It's not just for them and for their stuff. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Because that's just very good marketing, just to niche down and to target people who know that they value this stuff already and they will need to have it done. So that's just very,
Yeah.
very sensible marketing.
I would say for years people have told us, like, I can't emphasize this enough, pick one audience. And I've always had for ages three. Like we had events over here, we had festivals over here, we had maybe market managers over here, and then we did a little bit with creative agencies over here, and it was like this, and then actually, to be completely honest, we had an argument about a piece of content that should, or our own content that should go out. I said, oh, we should be doing blogs about the behind the scenes process. And, we should be doing, like, this is how we made this and blah, blah, blah. My business partner was like, no, because creatives get that already. And then we just had this like light bulb moment where we're like, well, we're talking about two different audiences. Do you know?
Okay.
And we were like, the whole reason for this argument, and every other argument we've ever had about this kind of stuff, is we're talking about different audiences. Let's pick one.
Yes.
So
Beautiful. I love that because you do get to pick one,
yeah, and
and
I think
then
it's the hardest thing you can do actually, is pick one, because you want the logic in your businessy brain goes, well, why would I exclude all those other people? By picking one. I need to, if I'm going to make more money, I'm going to have lots of them. And it's the complete opposite to that. And so we picked one, but we still work directly to client. What we have found at the directly to client people that we work with are really creative direct to client people.
yeah,
So they're only like a little hair away from the creative agencies, but they still have the same vision as creative agencies. They still have the same desire to make something good. They still want to invest in good content. They have all the same like wants and needs. They just are in a slightly different job role. But by just focusing on one audience makes every decision easier. And it doesn't mean that you never have to work for anybody else. It just means that more of that one type of company or person will come to you, I would say.
yes, 100%, 100%. And there's a quote. I think it's Philip Kotler says, "Only stupid businesses try to sell to everyone." And it's so this thing about niching. To be honest, I've never done. I've never done. I've never done it. But this thing about having a niche, and especially in your business, because then, like you say, you get more and more expert at doing this very particular thing.
Yeah, and then what
So
you find is those people, you will talk to people that are like you, right? So
yeah,
then you'll say to people, this is who you need to talk to for that thing.
yes.
Like, we think about it different ways. Like for example, we're getting our windows redone. Like
Oh, look at
we
you getting your windows redone.
I'm just looking at them. But like, do you know, like in the pub, we'll say to our friends, "Well, these guys were a bit cheaper than those guys," and actually, it's our first time ever doing any home improvement kind of stuff properly. So these are the first people we would go to, and we're saying that to a group of people that are similar to ourselves. We're not
Yeah,
going to say to someone who's getting their whole house, massive house of windows redone. We're talking to similar people, and you're everybody's customer will do that. They'll have their own little group of people that have all the same needs as them. So yeah.
because birds of a feather flock together. That's what goes on. So
Wow.
yeah, it makes perfect sense, but people don't do it. And you're right, it is exactly the opposite to what people think.
It
Because
is,
what
yeah.
people are thinking, especially if they want to be creatives, like video production companies, they're like,
Mhm.
please God, somebody in the world want to use me. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that is the worst position to be in if you're marketing, because now you've got to market to the entire world.
Yeah,
Whereas if
yeah.
you've niched, you can say, okay, and your message now is really very simple. It's like, we actually produce this stuff for these people who are really like you,
I know,
so
that's actually really one of the easiest parts is when you're trying to appeal to a creative director. We've got a creative director.
yes,
What would you want? These people work in very similar ways.
yep,
Okay, how do we hire freelancers? That's very similar to how a creative agency would hire us. It's
yes,
not it's not like if a freelancer was like sending me a really salesy email, it would be the last thing I would want to do is pick up the phone to them. But if someone's like, hey, here's my work, We'd love to connect with you. You want to get a coffee sometime, give us a shout. I
Yeah, yeah,
totally go
yeah.
for that time, do you know? So yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
Um, yes. Yeah, and I think that's it in terms of marketing your creative business. Just get your stuff in front of people who use your stuff, and if they like it, then they'll use you. Maybe I think that's the thing.
yeah. I think it takes a lot of chat as well, you know, like there was one point where we decided, okay, this is the audience we're going to focus on, and actually at the same time we were like, we're going to up our minimum spend, and uh, and for probably I don't know 6 months it felt like, but it might have been shorter. We were getting a lot of the old kind of briefs that we were getting, and we were saying no to them and being like, nope, we don't do a project under this amount anymore, so therefore we can't do that. And we were honest with people, and we kept saying it, we kept saying it, and then it got to a point where I was like, oh God, this is maybe not the right choice. Like, we shouldn't have done this. Like, maybe nobody's going to come to us ever again because we've said no to all this work, and now we're not going to get any of the work we do want. But it took a lot of speaking to people and a lot of getting that message over of this is now what we do and how we do it. And then one day it literally just took off. Like, we got one or two of them and then it just started to go. But it's because we had to communicate that, and it took several months of communicating that before that
Yeah,
worked, you know.
and I think it does. It's like the pressure has to build. You know what I mean? And then
Yeah.
it will burst. It does feel like that. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's something about like these people who believe that the universe will provide, or what was that book a few years ago that everyone was like, I don't think it's quite like that. You have to kind of put yourself in the situation where something can happen for you like that, I think.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So it's just not the universe. What was it? The Secret. That's the book that I'm thinking of. I don't know why I'm
Oh
thinking of that.
yeah, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's not how it works. Okay, cool. So, what is your recommendation then for people who want to either get better at video production or want to get more out of their video production?
Well, I think it's kind of, there's two sides to that. I think if you're a business and you just want to do it, you know, you want to do more video, I think the easiest place is just to start, as you say, because every time you make something, you will learn from it, and you'll make a mistake, and you might not want the content to go out, and that's okay. I would encourage you to put the content out either way, because you'll learn what works and what doesn't. I think if you're at the stage where you're looking at commissioning a video production company, which is obviously very different, I would go out and talk to them. I think people think, oh, like these guys are gonna, you know, try and push a quote on me or something, and they're gonna want to make video content right away. Like, I would say most people understand that these things take a while to get these decisions, and actually, I can't speak for everybody, but we just want to educate people on how it works, because then if you know, if we do that, then even if you don't go to us, then you'll you're going to get, there's going to be more demand for it at the end of the day. So I would say
Yes.
go and talk to people, just literally, you know, ask for a few recommendations, but then reach out to people and just say, can we have a chat? Because actually those are the most enjoyable things to do, is to understand the way someone works without the cost, the without a project there, I think. I
Yes.
think if you wait until you've got a project, then you've almost missed a step. You've missed a bit of that trust out. Do you know what I mean?
Like the making
I,
friends bit.
yeah, making friends bit, and that's
Yeah,
why. Yeah, it's half the reason to be in a creative business, isn't it? So,
I think so. I really think so. I hope so. Okay, good. Cool. We've been talking now for an hour and 14 minutes and 5 seconds and whatever that is, 100 frames. So what is your recommendation? Are you a reader? Firstly, I should ask that question because I'm
it's
aware
funny,
that,
I dip in and out of phases of reading. I like, and I'm not in one at the moment, to be honest. But like, I'll go through phases of being like, I'll just read loads, and I can whiz through a book, or you know, I listen to stuff as well, and then I go and watch some rubbish telly for 10 seasons and don't pick up a book.
so
So
is there a book or is there a piece of content you think that's been really important or interesting or useful for you in terms of where you are as a business, in terms of where you are as creatives?
Interesting. There's like three things I can think of off the top of my head. So I'm a big fan of Mary Portas, who you must know off the telly, who does like she would go into a business that's failing and revitalize it. Did a lot of TV back in the day. No, no, not know her. You
No,
should
I
look
do
her up.
know of her. I don't know if I've ever watched it.
Okay,
She's like the who's the chef, the rude chef. She's like the what's his name,
I'll go to
Gordon
Ramsay, but yeah, but
Gordon Ramsay of the business world. Is she? Is it like that sort of thing?
much more humane, I would say. Doesn't
Okay.
care. But she has recently, because she was creative director at Harvey Nicks for years and years and years. She's recently written a lot about work culture. She did a book called Work Like a Woman, which she also has a podcast and says it could be called Work Like a Human Being, because it's much more about being kind to people at work, and those kind of things. But more recently, she did one called, I think, Rebuild, which was about making sure people and the planet are treated fairly in a business. And so taking stuff around work culture, because she worked in a very lucrative but creative business, and got to the top by the time she was 32 or something. But actually, where was the enjoyment in that, and at what cost to the planet and to employees, and that kind of thing. So not necessarily for creatives, but just really, really interesting stuff, I think.
Okay.
um and then I'm sure people have mentioned Win Without Pitching before, which is Blair Enns. Um, I have read it, but didn't enjoy the book as much as the podcast. Blair Enns, and he's got another guy on his podcast. That and the podcast is called Two Bobs. And it's aimed at kind of design agencies, but I think anybody who works on project work could really just get that and just really enjoy that, because they're like 20-25 minute long podcasts, and they just talk about really, really niche issues. Like sometimes they're like, how to come up with creative ideas for a certain type of brand, or it might be how to get through procurement, or how to deal with people that we're working
Okay.
for. So really, really nice stuff. And then the other one, which I feel like I really want to plug, is Gareth, who introduced us. He wrote a book called
He already plugged his book.
Stand Out or Die. So that was a great, and I think it's interesting when you read a book and then either know a person or listen to a podcast, I suppose, in all three of those examples, because then you can dive in a bit deeper. It's
Yes.
like, I don't think I when I read Gareth's book, I can also hear our chats and being like, oh yeah, okay, I get that. So and I can do that with the Win Without Pitching. I see that in the podcast, and then the same with Mary Portas and her podcast. I can see them all come together. So yeah.
Super cool. Excellent recommendations. I'm going to go and check. I haven't bought Gareth's book. I need to buy that. But it's really nice the way he's framing that. I mean, he's really driving a message, is what I think is
Yeah.
really cool
Yeah.
about that.
And
And
then sometimes on his LinkedIn, like he'll do a quote from the book, and I think, oh God, I need to do that. Like he put up one yesterday about like recommendations. Stand still agencies don't ask for recommendations, but stand out agencies ask for them. And I'm like, okay, I need to go and ask for some recommendations.
yes. Good.
Um,
Excellent. And that's almost as close to a scripted segue as we could come, because now I need you to throw a couple of people under the bus. Firstly, I
yeah,
just need to check in. I have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. How's it been for you?
yeah, good. Yeah, great.
Excellent. Okay, so you're not going to struggle then to throw a couple of people under the bus.
No, I don't think so.
Okay,
um,
cool.
So I'm going to throw my friend Rachel Arthur under the bus, who runs an amazing creative studio and magazine called Boom Saloon, and they take all of their profit and they put it into a different project for every issue of the magazine. So this current issue is about for all the profits from this current issue go into helping people with dementia through a project in Edinburgh. They've done a project with refugees. They've done a project with hard to reach young people. Yeah, really, really great business. I love it. So, and a
Brilliant.
beautiful, beautiful magazine. I was going to see if I've got a copy of it, but it's in the other room. So, yeah,
Okay.
look it up.
Super cool. That sounds really nice. And is there somebody else?
I'm trying to decide between two people here. I'm not going to throw my business partner on the bus because I just do it too often and he'll kill me. But Ross, who is a writer director that we work with on a very regular basis and is a really core part of the High Tide team. Ross Johnson, he's quite like he's been working with us for a year, but he's brilliant and probably brings a bit of a different perspective to marketing too. And then there's one other
Yes.
person which I don't know if he would also kill me. So
Well,
I'm
let's
gonna say
see.
so our friend called Dylan Grote, he is actually just recently started just to do his own TikTok, kind of just dad jokes on TikTok, really, I would say, but has found huge amounts of success from it and has, I don't know what following it is off the top of my head, but a big following for someone who just does it in their spare time and has had brands approach him about, do you want to come and be an influence for this, and this, and gets free products and stuff. So he's
Cool.
probably got a very different view to video than me, but yeah.
Cool. And his name is Dylan
Grote.
Groat.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Excellent. So the way this works best is if you are able to, like Gareth did, if you're able to put together like a very short LinkedIn introduction or something like that, or an email introduction, and then I will pick it up for there. That would be brilliant. They sound like I really want to speak to somebody about storytelling. So like a writer-director, I think would be perfect for that. I want to speak to more creative people about kind of the creative process.
Yeah,
And
cool.
I'm also really intrigued. I have reacted. I did a reaction video to marketing people on TikTok. So I am fascinated by TikTok and what's going on there. So they sound like 3 great conversations. If you are able to put together those introductions, I would be enormously grateful.
You're
And
very
this will go as a clip, as an example of how to win recommendations.
Okay. Tag Gareth.
Okay, cool. I have had a thoroughly wonderful time. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you for having me. And
That's only a pleasure.
you have a great Wednesday, and I
Okay,
will talk to you soon.
cool. So what I normally say to people is we'll say goodbye now for anyone who's watching, and then I'll stop the recording. We'll say goodbye like normal human beings. It feels like we
Cool.
did it already.
Yeah.
Okay. I have
Fab.
thoroughly enjoyed this. Thank you so much.
Thank you. See you soon.
Cool. That's the cut. We'll be there. You're an absolute legend. Thank you so much.
Thank you. That was great. That was wonderful.
Okay.
Thrown into the deep end. Apologies, that was a bit wishy-washy at the start, but it was great. It was great.
I think it was a really cool conversation. I think it was really cool. I didn't think you were wishy-washy at all.
Okay, cool. Fabulous.
No.
That's good.
Okay, so where I am, I'm putting these out on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and I'm about 6 weeks ahead. So in about 6 weeks, at about 5 to 10 on a Tuesday or a Thursday morning, you will get a message saying it's going live now. If you can give it a like and a share and a whatever, then it will do it a lot of good. But that's the next that you will hear from me. You're an absolute legend. Thank you so much, Alex.
Cool. Well, let's keep in touch, and let me know if you need anything from me.
I will do for sure. You're a star. Cheers. Enjoy the rest of your Wednesday, are we?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Take care, Alex.
Bye.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.